Hey everyone, so excited to be here, especially with my good friend and colleague, Karl Dakin. Naturally, everything we talk about relates to funding. And to be a little more specific, we decided to go into plans, projections, and that can really apply to things you do in your everyday life as well as things that you focus on in your business career. Chat's open. We depend on chat to make us as relevant as possible. And with that, I'll turn it right over to Karl. He can give you a quick update and a hello. And first thoughts on plans and projections. Karl.
So thanks, Don, for having me on the show this morning. Always enjoyed being a guest and the opportunity to talk about funding. For a lot of people, funding is a constantly present type of topic because you never have enough money to do everything you want to do. And funding is supposed to be the path to get from where you're at to where you'd like to be. So this all falls into planning. This all falls into projecting going forward because if you're going to go out and get some funding today, you're going to have to pay it back sometime in the future. And it would be good to know with a reasonable degree of certainty that you're going to be in a position to do that. So often start my planning for funding with the end in mind. So rather than talking about where we're at today, which may or may not be close to even where we want to be in the future, in fact, the fact we want to do something new or different is an indication we'd like to have the future be different from today. So if we start with the end in mind, we're going to say, I'm going to borrow money to buy anything. I need to know that at the end of the story, whenever that's 6 months, a year, 5 years down the road, we've got enough money to pay back that loan, pay the interest that is accrued on the loan, either during the loan or at the end of the term of the loan. And that means that we have to know what we're going to do, what's going to generate the money. Is it going to be a large enough profit that is money over and above our costs to pay everything back? And this very basic concept is something that too often people don't give enough planning or preparation for. So they say, well, we're going to get started and we're going to hope that things turn out. And we believe that the future is going to be better. But there isn't, in my mind, a sufficient amount of preparation, planning, thought given to exactly how that's going to happen, to make sure that we're managing the process while we're engaged in whatever it is we're going to do. And if we don't do that, too often we're unpleasantly surprised at the end of the story because we don't have enough money to pay back an investor to reward them for giving us the funding that we wanted in order to get to this new position. And in fact, we may have failed to even realize our vision where we wanted to go. So planning becomes a critical part of knowing where we're going to go. It's helpful in order to obtain the funding because we have to tell our story to someone else and convince them that we know where we're going, we know what we're doing, and it improves our probability of success. So if we want to change where we're at to go someplace different, to be someplace better, planning is required. And if we're going to need other people's money in order to get from here to there, then we need to be able to communicate that as a story effectively to that person to give them the confidence that we're going to be successful so they give us the money so we can go give it a try.
Well, that's a great way of looking at it and communicating it. When I look at planning and, projections are a part of planning, there's a saying, fail to plan, plan to fail. The good thing I found about planning too is primarily it's for you first, right? So to put your ideas down on paper, spend a little bit of time understanding the numbers and getting straight and honest with yourself first, because I think realistic is a good word that supports planning. Is everybody can look at the world through rose-colored glasses, but eventually it is what it is, and it's never always as good as you may think, probably not always as bad as you may think, depending on what's part of the empty or full glass you're sitting with. And it's really about seeing where do things progress and understanding where you are, probably to an extent where you've been and how you got to where you are, which could tell you about the trend, could tell you about the pace. If you're growing really fast, it's harder to nail the future down. If it's a steady Freddy type of 2-3% a year, you can pretty much factor that in because you've got a foundation or a basis for it. And that's the other element. Saying it, believing in it, but justifying it is the key, because not everybody's going to know what you know. Nobody else is going to believe as strongly as you may be. So you've got to put it in a perspective that someone can see pretty quickly. If it becomes a long, convoluted, drawn out affair, people just give up or get lost in the haze. And it's really important to figure out low-hanging fruit, things you can do short term versus long term, things that take higher capital investment versus less. So you have all these different controls in front of you. You get to adjust them up and down until you get clarity, a quality picture going forward, and something that you're confident in communicating and makes it easier for every party. And I think the lowest common denominator towards understanding is where you should start at. Not assume something, not have to explain things that you could have outlined in advance, because what you want is to get to the meat of it, right? Because time is of the essence. If you don't get people's attention, if you don't get people's interest, if there's not alignment to say they're already in this market, they're already looking to expand in this market, well, a lot of the legwork has been accomplished at that point. And me and Karl have talked at numerous occasions on making sure there's a fit between you and the plan and the people you're presenting it to, how you target that group, and how you have a strategy, because like eating an elephant, it's one piece at a time. And you need to allow people their time and place and understanding it. So, yeah, I would agree. We've got Omar here. Omar was a valued guest the other day with Dave Snell and Jason Gerardo and Kelly Steinecke. Omar has his own show, Zoom Party. Also, the only person who watches this show, I believe, on YouTube. So it's great to have you. Omar says the best in the West, and that's why I spend so much time promoting you, because you spend so much time promoting us. And I think that also lends itself to planning and projection is where's the reciprocal opportunities? Where do people work together instead of just tag along and put it all on your shoulders? And we talked about that briefly, is responsibility, accountability, and knowing what everything and everybody is expected. So, Karl, with that said, how do you take that even to another level?
I think the point you made, Don, that I'd like to start with has to do with starting with the basics. Too often, somebody will have a dream, a vision of where they'd like to go, and they start with that as an assumption, as though that's automatically going to happen. And when they do that, too often they miss out on all the details that are necessary to get from where you're at to where you want to go, your strategy for moving forward. So once I know which direction I want to go, if I want to go west, which in Denver is towards the mountains, then still the first thing I want to do is start with a very basic business model, which I call a single transaction analysis, where I say, I'm going to take one step forward towards the mountains. What's required in that step? And I try to be objective about this. I don't use my height or my stride or whatever. I just say, this is a normal building block towards where I want to go, which is to move in this direction. And I break that down to a series of actions, activities, interactions, and so forth, So if I use an example in my instant funding newsletter of selling a single serving of lemonade, which sounds very simple because everybody knows how to do it. You just throw together some water, sugar, and lemon juice, and you have lemonade. But if you're going to run that as a business, then you have to figure out all the different things that go into making that serving, who you're going to sell it to, what your cost of materials is going to be. And something that seems ultra normal, ultra easy, can become relatively complex very easily. But you have to master the single set of activities before you can scale it up into something that you're going to do over and over again in larger and larger quantities. And so starting with those very basics is the essence of your first start in your strategy and your planning. With that, once you really understand everything that can take place within that basic business model, then we'll start talking about, well, what if you did not a single serving of lemonade, but 1,000 servings, and 1,000 servings a day, and you're going to do it in a bricks and mortar store. And we keep adding these layers of complexity, which are all normal to running a business. But we soon find that there's all these things we need to know. And if we don't know them, then we have a problem. And if we're not capable ourselves of doing this, when we step back into our own vision and we see that we don't know how to get a permit to sell lemonade in a bricks and mortar store, then we have to go get somebody who can help us get that necessary license to operate and conduct a business that sells food within safety standards within the state of Colorado, within the United States. And These are all things entrepreneurs can learn, and quite often they do it on their own, which may be slower, but at least the lessons are being learned and brought home. But to accelerate that, they can go out and find somebody who's an expert in getting a permit of that nature, and they can accelerate through it. But sometimes, again, the entrepreneur doesn't learn how to do that by observing, watching the expert that they hire. And so in the future, if they have to do it again, they're going to have to go hire that same person. That may be good, or it may be a cost they don't want to incur again. So everything is a learning process. But as we start our journey, as we start moving through our strategy, we start with that very basic framework. And if we really do understand and can master that, then we have a building block in which we can start doing bigger, more complicated things, which hopefully will get us to the vision we have for the future.
Yeah, I like that building block scenario. And I also like how you started it with the simple, basic business itself. And I think that you have to have something you can condense in very few words, at least as a title to your plan. So, right off the bat, you identified lemonade stand, right? And then what you get to do is drill down multiple layers. So you're going to need a location, right? And that's part of your plan. You're going to need some level of supply. In the beginning, it might be go to grocery store, buy a pound of sugar, buy a couple lemons, and you got water. And then you got to find, what do you do to service and package it? So are you serving in paper cups? Are people sitting there, or are they on the road? Is this like a drive-through? And I think it's a great lesson for young people. So if you have people that you're related to and they decide to start something, it'd be nice to have a simple idea for them, for an understanding that, because of the understanding, could lend itself to more scale and then more drill down, because eventually you're going to deal with staffing, and it could start with just you, and it usually does, and then maybe your spouse or partner and or good friend, where you can keep the overhead down long enough for the business to pick up, and then support the business with the business. And most people get in the hole, and then they got to dig out while they're figuring out the business. And that's a challenge. So I wouldn't say go slow or go fast, but have some method to it. Be successful at the primary level, drill down when you're ready to the next level, figuring out hours of operation, figuring out different ways to promote, because marketing becomes a key. You're going to have to make a sign for that lemonade stand. It could be a simple one or it could be something more elaborate. But here's the thing is you can start with lemonade 25 cents and then change the sign in time once you start to meet and greet the customers. Once you understand maybe they want different flavors, larger volumes. So even a simple thing, and I appreciate Karl coming up with the lemonade stand, is being able to appreciate every little nuance, because as you expand it, those little things become bigger things. And if they're positive things that can compound in time, then you're on the right track. If it's hit a wall, retract, go forward, hit a wall, it's kind of painful and stressful for the person having to go through the exercise. But you can apply this to parts of your personal financial situation, because taking the time, writing things down is powerful. Sharing it with others, sometimes you may be successful in acquiring whatever you're looking for, but in most cases, the biggest benefit is feedback. And that's why being on the same time frame or ahead of people's time frame, where you've got as much time as you need to acquire what you need. And that way you can afford to get positive feedback, even through maybe some sources that wouldn't be your first choice, but maybe they're your most helpful choice. And then through there, you never know who's going to refer you, right? Somebody say, I'm not in the lemonade business, but I know Joe over there. He loves those kind of businesses. You may want to talk to him. So, it's a process and a continuation. It's not a finale. Because even as you get forward your plan, you're going to have to revise it based on what you're doing, how it matches up to what you thought you would be doing, and then how you change it. And that makes it more interesting for everybody. I mean, especially if you're talking to people and every time you go back to them, you've got a progress update that says, hey, I moved even further along while we've been discussing this, and here's here and here's there. So it's very fun and dynamic and creative if you put those elements into place, versus I got to throw some numbers together, got to raise some money, and then got to go back to doing what I do. Once you open up the money, you open it up to people with the money. So you can never go back to the way it was. What's your thoughts, Karl?
There's 2 points that I'll follow up on. One is we start talking about projections, the future, because as a business person, you're always having to prepare for tomorrow. And as you described it, yeah, let's go buy a pound of sugar, let's buy some lemons and some water. But if you put that in the context of operating a lemonade stand, the sugar can sit on the shelf for quite a while. Those lemons have a used by this date. If it's not stamped on it, you can tell when they turn kind of green or moldy, and then you probably should throw them away. Um, but the point being is that you now have to have an inventory and you have to resupply this. And in your first day of operation, if you bought all this stuff and you sell one glass of lemonade, then you didn't make a profit. I can guarantee you that, because the cost of the sugar is more than the charge that you made for that single serving of lemonade. So by doing projections, you're going to determine how many glasses of lemonade you need to sell in order to hit a point of break even, where your cash flow in and your cash flow out are in balance with each other. And this is a very important milestone for businesses, because at that point, they are on the cusp of being profitable. And for any business that's just getting started, the first dollar revenue is a very important milestone. But the more important milestone is the day that you become profitable, because at that point, you're making more money than it cost you. And this is a point that's important to you, because you don't have to continue investing into this. Or if you're using other people's money, you can stop using that money and start paying it back with the profits that you're earning. The other point that you made, though, Don, is that in anything you do in a business, you have to have customers, and you're probably going to have suppliers and vendors. There's going to be other people that you are dependent upon in order for you to be successful. And you're going to have different relationships with each of them. And at the same time, you can't control them. So if you're saying, wouldn't it be nice if I sold 100 glasses of lemonade today and you had no customers show up? You can't tell a customer to show up. They're going to show up for their own reasons, their own self-interest. And same way, if you wanted to buy that pound of sugar at the store and you found out that the supply chain is broken and you can't get sugar today, then you can't make any lemonade today. So if you didn't already have it in your inventory far enough ahead to assure that you could stay open every day, then you've got those issues. So your dependence upon other people ends up being a critical part of your overall strategy and your planning, because you have to account for your own actions, your own work. Then you have to account for everybody else, which may or may not be dependable, and it may vary. If I was trying to sell lemonade in Houston this morning, where the hurricane hit at 3 o'clock this morning, I would guess that we're probably not going to sell anything. And if I was dependent upon electricity, most of the city is out of electricity at the moment. So today would be a bad day. And if I had planned in, going forward that I was going to make so much money selling lemonade today, I would be wrong. And I would have to account for that with sales at later days or earlier days in order to make my target and to stay on track to be profitable. So all the things that you're doing are need to be thought through to allow for things that are dependent upon other people. And you want to influence them through your marketing, through your location of your lemonade stand. But the weather is the weather, and it will do whatever it's going to do.
Well, you bring up some wonderful points, Karl, because business has never been more challenging, but there's never been more opportunities to meet those challenges. So in the past, people had to come to you. So in other words, if you take the lemonade example, if you set up on even the busiest corner near your house, that's where it is. Today, with having lemonade trucks where you can go to the events, just like they have food trucks, where you could take your product to where the business already is, makes a lot of sense. Where, in the older days, being in a small town was a disadvantage because supply chain was more challenging. It took longer to get there, took more distance, time in transit, and you would be behind someone who was getting same day product versus someone who was getting 3-day product, or was forced in many cases to depend on one or two local suppliers who may not have been price competitive with some major national players. Now with Amazon and with all these other organizations, Costco will deliver. Everybody everywhere has access to that same product in the same way. So it's kind of balanced the scales where things that were like a small town, small business operation could now leverage it. The ability to get remote workers, fractional workers, where, the nice thing about starting a small business by yourself is you're already where you want to be and stay if you can. So the next person you add is typically because you've already gone 150% of the job yourself. And at that point, you can say, well, I can add a person, get back 50% of my time that I was putting in, plus whatever it was. And a lot of things are not core competency. A lot of things can be shared and leveraged with other people. And you move up the ladder to higher level activity. And you're also showing that it's bigger than you, because one of the big questions always comes up is what happens if you get hit by a bus, right? If you're the only lemonade stand and you're the only lemonade person in the stand goes and leaves with you, where you have the ability now to open up a second stand if you like, right? Because you opened the road, you put the systems in place, you've done it yourself. And I think doing everything yourself in the beginning is a benefit. Most people, well, I need someone to clean the floors. I need somebody this. Well, who's going to pay for it? And does the person buying your lemonade know or care that you just hired somebody and paid them all your profits? No. You care, but now you're making somebody else pay for something they had nothing to do with. And if you have to, then you should. But if it's a matter of, hey, I'm the boss, I'm the owner, I don't have to do work, it's really the flip side. When you're working for yourself, you should be working as hard or harder than you used to work for someone else, because you've got the full upside, you've got the freedom, you've got everything that hopefully you wanted, but you need to put the time, the work in, and have that understanding and appreciation on why a lemonade stand and why not an ice cream stand. Was it the first thing you thought of or the first thing you did and you say, let's keep this going? Or do you have options? Or again, do we expand the menu? If we're selling lemonade, do we sell sandwiches once in a while? And all of a sudden you're getting a higher sale per customer, possibly. You're opening yourself to a wider audience for people maybe who are not lemonade people, but maybe they're fruit punch people. Whatever the case, the nice thing is trial and error. Put what you can down, look at it, ask yourself, is this real? Is this something that gets me excited on a Monday morning to get up and go do it every day? And is there an upside? And can I see it? And once you accomplish that, then you're in a better position. And I would say, we talked before the show about putting 5-year projections in or anything. In today's world, there is so much dynamic change that even if you decide to lock in where you are and where you want to be, the world's not going to come to your rescue, right? So if you're not thinking of AI, that's something. If you're not thinking about blockchain or some ways to connect with others in a more sophisticated way, the other thing you have as a startup, let's say, is you're fresh. You're not dragging legacy into the future. If you have a 30-year-old business, you've got probably people there from 20 years ago or 15 who you may not hire today if you knew what you knew and you had to make the choice. So a lot of times you have no choice, or you have, but you don't take it, with sacred cows, with we don't want to rock the boat, we're happy the way things are. But when you're fresh, you don't have any of that to compete with. And you're starting out at today's technology with everything you learn. And sometimes just a twist to something that's been done the same way will open up the market to you. And it could be pricing, it could be quality, it could be a zillion things. But again, how does that match up with what you're interested in, not just what the world's interested in? And I think what it lends itself to is advice and advisors. And again, depending on what your level, if you're a 14-year-old kid, maybe your parents are a good first venture capital source, right, for advice. And maybe they'll lend you $5 to get the sugar and everything rolling for you. And then from there, you can build up, but everything matches. You wouldn't raise $100,000 for a lemonade stand that needs $50 a week, and nobody would probably give it to you anyway. So you're saving both of you a lot of time and trouble. I think that golden rule, or even the platinum rule, is what do you get excited by? What when someone presents something to you makes you want to get more involved in some way? Well, that's the same approach you have to take to the other people. Karl, you've been in this business so long. What has kept you in this business so long?
Well, part of the answer is that the business I'm in has kept me in the business this long. The ideal, as you were talking very early on, if you're in a business that's been around for a long time, it's a steady Freddy type of business. You pretty much know what's going to happen tomorrow because that's what happened yesterday. And you are going to have to adapt to changes that have occurred, whether the state just imposed a mandate on improving the energy efficiency of your building without which costs you money and there's nothing to cover that new mandate. Or you're using AI in part of your management, and AI is making leaps and bounds in terms of its capabilities, which can serve to reduce your costs, maybe to offset the cost of improving the energy efficiency of your building. It's steady Freddy. A lot of times I deal with startup businesses, ones that weren't there yesterday. They're trying to take advantage of something new in the market, an opportunity. And in this case, tomorrow is always going to be different from yesterday because we weren't doing tomorrow what we did yesterday. And it's a constant high, fast growth learning curve. And even with a steady Freddy business, if they add a new product, they add a new location, they add something new, then they're going to be doing something new to deal with this change, with the innovation that's taking place. So we have all these changes occurring, and you have to, set your goals firmly enough. So as I said, if I wanted to go to the mountains and go west, when the fog rolls in and I can't see where I'm going forward, or it's raining so hard that you're afraid to move your car or whatever, once the weather clears, I still want to be pointed in the same direction. I still want to have that same goal or outcome in mind. So in my planning, I have to prepare for the good days and the bad days. The days when a hurricane blows into my backyard and knocks out the electricity, and the only way to get to my lemonade stand is in a boat instead of in a car. So everybody on the south coast of Texas today is experiencing these types of challenges, and it's going to have serious implications for those businesses that did not prepare or plan for this, and it may put some of them out of business. This may be the final straw that breaks the camel's back, and that they cannot carry one more challenge of this magnitude, and it's time for them to go do something else. Um, so planning and preparation is all there. You do the best you can to put everything together. You anticipate that changes will occur. You allow for growth, for bringing more people on board, more complications because of different rules that change from time to time. And so, what gets you up in the morning is what's going to cause you to come into work with a smile on your face. And if you're coming in too many mornings in a row with a frown or in depression or feeling bad, it may be time to move on to something else. But I was talking with a guy over the weekend, or for the July weekend, about how we should divide ownership in this new startup. And I said, well, if the other guy provides all the money and they provide compensation to you for doing what you do during the day, how much do you think you should own in this particular business enterprise? And the person was challenged to come up with a number that they could justify. And I said, because what you've just described to me is an employer-employee relationship. You basically said, I want a job. I want to be paid no matter what. I don't want to assume the risks that go with this enterprise going up or down, such as a hurricane coming on shore this morning. And I just want to I want to be right in that zone where I know tomorrow what's going to happen is just like yesterday. Well, at that point, you're not absorbing the risk. You're not engaged in the ups and downs of that particular business. And you're right or assumed privilege to participate in profits of that business is questionable at that point in time. So it's an interesting question to get people thinking through this whole thing of what is a business, what goes into it, who's at risk if things don't work out the way you want. And it isn't like the market isn't giving you more challenges every day. So just about the time you think you've achieved a steady Freddy business, something new will come along, and you'll have to deal with that. So it's an interesting challenge for me. I like the front end. I like putting together projects where we have a bunch of loose ideas and we have to weave them into a formal business enterprise, figure out all the parts and pieces, who's doing what, and test it up front before we open the doors, before we buy the real estate, before we buy inventory, and go, is this a workable thing that we can do? Is this something that everybody on the team agrees that they will accept responsibility for their part? Does this make a profit? Will this achieve the outcome of this particular enterprise? So this is like a massive puzzle sometimes with not just 100 pieces or 1,000 pieces. It might be in the 5 millions of pieces, but it's a puzzle to be solved. But if we're successful in that, usually you'll have an outcome that justifies all the time, work, and effort. So it may be a product that solves a problem somewhere. It may help a community benefit, to improve the quality of life within that community. But there's got to be an outcome that makes sense. If you're just in it for the money, it's really hard to get up in the morning and face that next day just looking for a dollar, because there are certainly going to be easier choices out there than running your own business.
Yeah, I think that makes so much sense. And, what I gathered from it is there's that risk reward factor involved. And to get to the hurricane itself, I was talking to my brother-in-law who lives in Houston and spends time in Galveston, and actually is in Galveston right now. And we were talking, and I said, what's your plan? He says, well, we get sandbags going. And I said, so what are you filling them up? And he said, no, I go to Home Depot and they've got these 50-pound bags already in place, and they're part sand and part some polyethylene or something to bring it together. And I just gather it. So what it does say is where Home Depot would prefer to be selling a lawnmower today in Houston, knowing that no one's going to be doing their lawn in a hurricane, they've got the ability to switch over to all of these emergency flashlights, batteries, candles. And, every business could have some sort of compensating service. So in other words, you could be selling ice cream in the summer and hot coffee and hot chocolate in the winter and stay 12 months a year. And that's why I think Dairy Queen, that used to be just a ice cream place, added food. People who just did this added one more thing. And there is a point, because I had a very significant retail business, and there is a limit to what you can add. And pretty soon, well, I sell pizza, I sell Chinese food, I sell this, I sell that. It's like, what kind of restaurant do you call yourself? Whatever you feel like eating, I cook. Or are you a specialist? And again, what type of customer do you have? Is that the kind of customer that has a lot of expendable income? Is it a high end, high service? In retail, the saying was the only three things you offer is price, quality of service, and selection. And if you offer all three, you go out of business. So if you look at most of the biggest, best retailers, Costco has very little selection, has very little direct service, but has a great price, and they do the shopping for you. They'll pick out the one cornflake this month that they got a deal on, and most people just assume it. And what's interesting is they found a better way of making money, because they're supposedly, and I'm sure it might have changed, they work on somewhere between 7 and 10 or 12% gross. All of that just goes to pay expenses. So they don't make money when they sell something, but at $75 a head for membership, and if you got 3 million members and their stock is going through the roof, and Sam's Club does the same thing, is they would just rather get the money up front, whatever it is. I'm sure there's opportunities in certain things that they make more money than others. I remember I was fortunate enough to be a accepted vendor on their part. And it meant that if I was able to fit the formula, I could get the product in. The issue was you had to sell it for the sale price had about to be 30% less than the market price anywhere. And they wanted to make 30% or 20% margin. Well, find someone who's going to sell you a quality product at 60% off. So you can just satisfy their need and then find a way to pick up 5, 10, 15% on yours. But at the same time, they had the distribution. There were deals that I did with them that were over $2-3 million and took 30 minutes because it was like, here's the money, ship the product, pay it, and we're done. A lot of, you might call it gray market to a point. But there's a reason why people do what they do, but it also tells you if you want to be in this business, you got to do this part of it, right? You've got to adjust and be flexible. That's why big companies like Walmart, they have people lining up at their door every day with thousands of new products. And you've got to fit that mold and qualify, but knowing once you're in, you don't, all you have to do is keep pumping the stuff over. So I think what that lends itself to is what part of the business do you want to really focus on? And if you're trying to be what Sears Roebuck used to be, and at one time they owned the companies that they sold. So they did enough in washers and dryers that they could establish brands like Kenmore or Craftsman. Actually went on and owned Allstate at one time, Dean Witter. I mean, they were a full service. Mistake was they should have kept everything but the retail, and they would have made a fortune. But again, I think vision has a lot to do with it. How does a guy like Sam Walmart come into a retail business that already had Kmart, that already had Sears, already had mail order and all kinds of different distributions? And what was fascinating, because I really spent a lot of time studying Walmart and Sam Walton, is they came in when technology was making a difference in distribution. And what they identified, and they were the first companies to put satellite dishes up, the big ones in their store. So on Mondays, everybody could meet via satellite to discuss sales, products, any new innovations. Everybody got faster, better, and their net distribution cost was typically about 4 or 5 points lower than everybody else. So you don't have control over pricing, and coming into the market, you're probably not getting the best price. If you're buying 10 items and someone's buying 1,000,000, you're not going to get the best price, but then you can just, sell as it comes in and then sell out. Where another opportunity is being an in-between player. And what that means is get into areas that are too small for anybody else, but really big for you. So if you went to Walmart and said, or Costco and says, well, I got a great deal, I can give you 40% off, you can make 40%, but I only have 50 of these. Well, they wouldn't even think about 50 of these because they got thousands of stores. Second thing is they need time. So right now, if it's July, they're planning Christmas. If you want to get in there for Christmas, you better start putting your stuff out there and getting approvals. And then again, depending on purchase orders or commitments, now you got to work with your supplier, which was always the easier part. Because anytime you go to a supplier and says, I got a purchase order for 500,000 of your products, at that point, they're thinking about market penetration, market awareness, brand awareness, that they can say, hey, we'll make very little on this, but we'll get exposure. Some companies forbid exposure. I remember I was a big Toro dealer, actually the biggest in the Rocky Mountain area. And for years, they would say, it'll never be in a big box store. It'll always be through our dealer network. And you heard that. And one day it was in Walmart. Why? Because they could sell 1,000,000 at once instead of playing around with all the sales reps and the little guys. And they just decided, hey, this was the turning point. So what you have to also realize is windows open and close. And, very quickly. You never own anything because it's so public and everybody's aware of it. I used to be the guy who went to all the trade shows in Chicago and Vegas, found some really cool items. I remember when kerosene heaters came out and I got on it. And man, they were so hot, not just because they were heaters, but I would be ordering truckloads. And as soon as it came in, they would be sold. Well, what happened? The safety department here in the US decided, someone went on Good Morning America and said they're unsafe, and they tend to build fires, even though Japan was using them for 50 years and they never had an issue. But once that happened, everything dried up. Once you got a new product and you became a vendor acquisition tool for your big players, you'd see tons of sales, and then all of a sudden you'd see a sales report, nothing. And you knew, well, they just picked it up and they lowered the price. And as soon as you said that, yeah, Amazon just got it. Why? They were making 15% off of me and watching. They said, we can make 20% without this guy. And I used to equate it like renting a room from a hotel, and at midnight they put their brother-in-law in with you, and they make money both ways. So, it is comical, but I think that's one thing that experienced, wise people, some things in history always repeat themselves, and some things are brand new the day they show up. And once you've been around and you see certain things, you say, well, it's only going to last until this happens. And when that happens, it's going to change. So what it really does is say, you got to get ready to reinvent yourself. You've got a 3-year time frame. And if you can get in on the second year or before the third year shows up, maybe you can get another 3-year run. And it's not 30 years in the same business. It's the same type of business reinvented 10 times every 3 years to get you to 30. And it puts you in the mode where you have to, and you desire to. Most people in the past, because change was so slow, dragged their feet or denied it. I mean, how many blacksmiths saw their first car driving down the street, yelled at it, cursed it and said it will never happen, and went back to their horseshoes? And somebody who was working in a garage, maybe on who knows what, compressors or something, said, hey, this is the going thing, and let's invest. So I think courage, confidence, experience will make a person, or allow a person, to take that big step. And, it goes through, I forgot the 3 levels of whatever it is, but the first guys are the ones that are, the pioneers, the guys with the arrows in their back. Everybody's thinking it's a dumb thing, it's never going to work out. And there were inventions that turned out to be very commonplace, but just a vacuum cleaner. When it came out, everybody's like, we have a sweeper, and we could sweep. We don't need to buy this with all this noise and this expense, until they actually had enough friends who were using it, and by peer pressure. So, if you really look at planning, there's no end to it. You could plan on having a planning business. And in a lot of ways, that's kind of what Karl's involved in, that all you do is help people understand their business, put it on paper, see it, believe it, have the confidence to go out and do it. But, like we talked here, if you can't do it, could we do it? And most people have 70 or 80% of the puzzle pretty well down pat in their mind. But now they're trying to find that other 20 or 30, and sometimes it's just fluff. Sometimes it's redundancy. It's more of the same in different ways. And when someone sees the light and says, wow, yeah, I could track this for 2 years, and I sincerely believe at the end of 2 years, we're going to come out so much better for it, because that's what's going to go with the plan that you present, is how exciting was it? How excited are you? People are going to trust you with their money. Are you going to be working just as hard for them as you would for yourself? And a lot of people are into that. There's what they say, other people's money and other people's time. And if you use one or both, you have a way of leveraging what you have, and, open your mind to it. Today, too, there's so many resources, but there's so much competition. There's so much easy access to markets. There are still some blue laws that were out there that you couldn't do business on Sunday. It was just the way it was. You couldn't do other things, and then you had to work with it. But what's funny, I read an article the other day that chicken fillet, which is only open 6 days a week, is so much more profitable than all the 7-day a week drive-throughs, right? Because people, and I found that with hours, if you extend hours, you spread your business in most cases, you don't get more business. So when I was open till 6, everybody got there at 6. When I opened till 9, I got the same people, but they wandered in after dinner. Was no rush. And if there's no rush, maybe there's no action. So that sense of urgency, 3 days only, truckload sale, everything must go. It depends again on which business you're in, who you're dealing with, but there should be some urgency and reason why I'm going to drop what I'm doing today and go over there. One other story I like to tell, in the older days, there was a toy called Teddy Ruxpin. And that was a big deal. It was one of the first toys that could talk and do things if you pressed a button. And there was a guy I was talking to, and he says, "You will never know what happened to me." And this is when malls were pretty famous. And I said, "What happened?" He said, "I was going to walk out of the mall, and I saw like 20 women running down the mall. And I had to figure out, what is everybody running for?" And it was the same thing with the Cabbage Patch doll and Teddy Ruxpin. Hey, they just got 50 in. And I ended up buying a Teddy Ruxpin toy because I got caught in the frenzy of hey, they got him, we got to get him, Another good thing is those stuffed little animals. I forget what they call them. But anyways, people were trading in them, Beanie Babies.
Yeah.
And people were paying $500 for a Princess die. One more story. I'm going down memory lane. I was invited when Coors Field had their All-Star game. Seems like anytime you build a stadium, you get an All-Star game. And my son was probably 10 or 11, and it was a big newspaper every day. So we got a great pre-party thing, and he got a bat, and he got everything, a whole package. And at the end of the game, they passed out All-Star Beanie Babies, right? It was like red, white, and blue and everything else. And there was, 50,000 people showed up. And I remember leaving the stadium, and people were like, "I'll give you $200 for that. I'll give you $300. And my wife just happened to be a collector. And I said, "Hey, I got to tell you something. They gave us 2 dolls or Beanie Babies, and I'm getting an offer for 200. Oh, a guy just said 300. And Ann said, "No, they'll probably be worth thousands. Don't ever sell them." I said, "Can I sell one at least?" No, you got to keep them. I said, "Okay." It didn't cost me anything, and my wife was into them. I don't know what you do and wipe a carpet with them now or something, but it showed you that value was determined as much by demand as the quality of the product. And if you have people rushing to get something, and sometimes there's actually forced scarcity that people apply. I was reading this book, The Algebra of Wealth, and it went into the whole Levi's 501 jeans thing that took place 30, 40 years ago, that you could buy them for 40 here, sell them in Europe for 100. And people would pack a suitcase full of them, pay for their trip almost, because of the arbitrage. And Levi's knew exactly what was going on, but they were comfortable with that scarcity element. So I guess the key then is, what makes you want to have people run through a hall to get to your product, pay more than it's worth because of the perceived value of how, the scarcity. Even today, there's cars that people have paid way over sticker. It could go for 150, but if there's only 30 of them, people will pay more. So I think that's where looking at things and saying, how do I become more than what is? And how do I get there fast? And to this day, where I see is communication has never been stronger and more direct, where you get your own microphone. You can be broadcasting like we're doing 8 hours a day on your product. And actually, if I had a store or a lemonade stand, I'd be running the show while I was doing the business, right? So while I'm waiting for a customer, I'm sharing the information. I'm even interviewing customers on the show. Why not make that part of it? Because now you're leveraging the live streaming opportunity with the lemonade opportunity. And all of a sudden you become the lemonade person, who maybe connects all the lemonade stands around the country. So, I'm so excited, especially whenever I'm with Karl, because we do come up with stuff that really bridges not only what we know, but what can apply to what's going on, and to paint the picture in a way that people get excited by the picture that they may have always been sitting on, never know how to project it properly, and refine it, because everybody started somewhere. And to get to Walmart one more time, when he opened his first store, it's because Ben Franklin wouldn't allow him to do more than they did. He started out with 2 Ben Franklin hardware stores and somewhere in Arkansas, and did pretty well. And when he wanted to add things, change things, they said, no, this is the recipe, stick with it. And he said no, and he started his own. Well, anyways, the day he started, he ended up having this big sale on watermelons, and he had donkey rides for the kids. And it turned out it was like 98 degrees, scorching humidity. The watermelons were bursting, the mules were pooping, and it was one of the craziest days. But it didn't matter, because look I'm telling the story. If it was a perfect day with no mules and watermelon, it would have just got lost in the shuffle. So a lot of times you're telling your story in different ways. I mean, there was this one guy who had the shaving commercial, and it ended up getting like 400 million views and put him on the map. So Karl, I know really went here, there, and everywhere. I guess when you're talking about plans, there is no limit.
No, it's true. Everything you're going to do, from even what I'm going to do today, which um, is run down to the store and pick up a little extra cold medicine for the next few days. You have to allow for a different plan. I start every day with an idea of everything I want to accomplish in the day. I prioritize those things that need to happen today, if at all possible, and things that I may decide needs a little more time to cook or to get ripe before we push them too hard. And when I depend upon other people to do stuff, then it's like I call it playing tennis. If I volley the ball to their side of the court, it's on their side of the court. I don't know when they're going to volley back. It's not necessarily an instantaneous kind of a thing. And I have to take that into account, that sooner or later the volley is coming back, and I am going to have to be prepared for it, be in the right position to do what I need to do. Um, so it's a constantly changing, evolving thing. And in my world, that's a highly volatile situation. Every day is very different. But we're planning as best we can with all these variables, with all these people that we're interacting with, and using what tools we can find or master to help control and engage in all that. So it makes for a new day is a new day. It may have some resemblance to tomorrow, or it may have some resemblance to yesterday, but it keeps life interesting. And for me, that's an important thing that I look for.
Well, that's great. And that's what I look forward to being with you, is because our imaginations have open field, and how creative you can get with something that sometimes people would think isn't too exciting or very creative, but it's what do you have that it's built on, and where's the trend, and are you capturing a lot of it? And the main thing I believe with everything is what makes you happy. Just being how many baseball players have said in the past, I don't know how true it is today, that they wouldn't have to pay me to play this game. I love this game so much. And just being in the major leagues and getting out there, and that's proven true for the people in the minor leagues and the farm teams who have to take slow buses and make very little money, but they love the game. They want to find ways, in the lacrosse world, and it's starting to show like in WNBA, everybody who's playing professional lacrosse has to fly on a Friday and come back on a Sunday. And they got to have a full-time job Monday through Thursday because the average pay is probably 25, 30 grand a year. Maybe for their best player goes up a little. And my son happened to be the general manager of the Denver Outlaws and worked for them for 12 years, which was incredible because he reached that level at 30 years old. And actually at that point, he was the highest tenured person because he started as an intern at 18. But, these guys, they did a lot of stuff for very little money, but they loved the game. And I think if you love what you're doing, that's enough reward to keep you in the game, to have a little bit more patience, to kind of go inside and find reasons that you can stay in the game, not reasons why it's time to leave. And, there's always that shining object. But, through this conversation, it's just reinforced to me how important gentlemen like Karl is to having an honest discussion to begin with. Like Beverly always says, who does Tomorrow, women's empowerment, she always has 15 minutes for anybody. Whoever it is, if you're, honest and have good intentions, and even if you don't, it's going to be 15 minutes. What do you want to do with it? That's an opportunity to test our interest in helping others and really sharing what we know through different stories that we're sharing today and different ways of looking at it, because there are more than one perspective. So I hope everybody enjoyed it. What's surprising is I have one of the largest crowds watching this, and I think maybe comments are working, but like 15, 16 people at a time. But, I also regard that as sometimes people are interested in a subject enough, they just want to hear it, or it's a kind of subject they don't have a lot of opinions on. But whatever the case, I want to thank everybody for being here, especially Karl, and look forward to having you back tomorrow, because tomorrow we've got Beverly and we've got a returning guest who is Helena. And she's just a wonderful lady. She lives in a beautiful part of Spain and has an unbelievable consulting practice. And then Wednesday, we have Jason. Thursday, we have Kelly and Dave, a little bit of a change there. So please come back and share any interest or comments you may have after the show with us. We'd be happy to hear from you. So last words, Karl?
Yeah, I just encourage everyone that if you have a vision and you want to go out and do something, planning and preparation improves the likelihood that you'll get where you want to go. And to the extent that you need other people's money to get from where you're at to where you want to go, take into consideration why they care. What do they get out of this? And is it going to be worthwhile for them to help you along with your journey? If you can answer that question succinctly and concisely, that generally is a reflection that you've done your planning, you've done your projections, and you can tell your story effectively to that person. So good luck in your new ventures, and enjoy the planning process.
Well said. With that, I want to thank everybody. Come back in 23 hours and we can do this again, and go out and have a wonderful week. We got a full week this week. Only had 4